All right, we are now recording. Hello, everyone. How are you doing on this Saturday?
It's been a
Or wait,
long week.
it's a Sunday. How are you doing on this Sunday?
Really.
For the
It's been
record,
a long week. It's been a holiday weekend, but the
yeah,
coronavirus cases are all skyrocketing in the news, and
yeah,
it's still not great. And we're both still kind of worn. We're feeling emotion fatigue from it all, I think.
yeah, and like it's because so we're recording this the holiday weekend of July 4th, and yesterday was July 4th, and we watched Malcolm X, which we'll probably talk about in our wrap-up section later, and that felt somehow appropriate, and also like it's just exhausting, and it's like I am also kind of exhausted just from like all the news, and my work was potentially going to open back up, and I was very nervous about that because I don't feel comfortable working in an enclosed space, especially when I don't have to. Anyways,
Yeah.
just one of those exhausting things.
Yeah, it would be different if you were at an office that it was more important that you.
Yeah,
know.
but we're mostly an internet. We're an internet. I
Yeah.
understand the desire to have people working in one location. Like it's an old school thing to me, but I don't think it's like bad. I think there are good reasons for it, but like right now and this year and until COVID gets under control, I just don't see the point.
Yeah, well, and meanwhile, I realized I was not leaving my house enough, and not because of COVID fears, just because objects in motion do not spontaneously go into motion. No,
Yeah,
objects not in motion do not spontaneously go into motion, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and meanwhile, I have the same problem where it's like, oh, what am I doing right now? Nothing. I'm going to watch a movie.
Yeah.
Like, that's basically just what I do.
Yeah, totally.
Anyways, let's get to the actual discussion. All right, so I have watched all of the Colombian Noirs. And
you get gold star.
I get a gold star. I have not released my post yet for it, but and on Instagram, long by the time this is out, because this is probably coming out in 2 weeks. I'm so behind on videos.
Yeah.
It will be out. And so there was essentially, for your knowledge and the knowledge of those watching, so the Colombian Wars thing I'm talking about is on Criterion Channel. And I'm sure there's more Colombian Wars, and I'm not even entirely sure how critically or not critically, in film criticism / in film theory.
It's true.
Theory, like how Colombian Noirs are dealt with as opposed to other noirs and all that.
Well, I mean, for those listening in at home, it doesn't mean noirs from Colombia, the country. It means noirs from Colombia, the studio.
Yes, which I didn't even think to make the clarification of. Thank you, because Colombia is you still see the logo sometimes, but it's not really, because it's Sony now. People just don't think of it as Colombia, even though it is. Anyways. But so when Criterion started a little over a year ago, they had a Colombian Noir section. And for whatever reason, I decided I was going to watch all of them. And I did before they left the service. And that was a lot of fun. I found Drive a Crooked Road, which is just one of my favorite like movies now. It's not like necessarily on the top of my like quality list, though it is actually pretty high up on my quality list. It still has issues, and it's a genre B movie, and ultimately I guess I preference complexity in a way that may be even unfair to a movie like Drive a Crooked Road. I don't know, but it's a very good movie and I love it. It had the only one that I technically haven't watched is In a Lonely Place, but that's because I've already seen it. Yeah. So I watched all the movies in it, and then on their 1 year anniversary or near it, or the 1 year the month of their 1 year anniversary, they did another Colombian War themed section. And this
the 1 year anniversary of having done the Colombian Noir
or just
selection.
Right, which was, well, the 1 year anniversary of the channel anniversary.
Got it. It was one of their inaugural collections. Got it.
It was their inaugural collection, so it was the anniversary of their collection and the anniversary of their channel.
Got it.
I actually have, and I have their little card too. This is making me think I have their little card because I subscribed right when they started. I should get that and show it off and be the geek and the dork I am.
We were subscribing, but my significant other didn't. Not so much.
It's fine. Oh, thank you. My girlfriend got it.
Aww.
I have, look, I'm a dork. It's my
a card. It says the Criterion Channel. It says your name.
Yeah, it says since April 8th, 2019. My camera can't quite handle the depth on this, but anyways, it's made of metal. It's not plastic.
Oh, nice. It's like one of those stupid credit cards.
Yeah. Anyways, so they did a second batch of Colombian Wars, and I finally watched them all because they were leaving at the end of last month of June.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why I decided to watch all of them the first time or the second time. I definitely enjoy noirs because I like a visual style. Like, I prefer Hollywood. We've been watching Spike Lee movies recently, and he tends to be a more cinematic director. Like, he isn't really going for realism. I mean, maybe in moments or in certain scenes or something, but like, he's not really striving for realism.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I like that kind of movie. It's fine if you're striving for realism. Summer of 1994 is, or 1984? I think it's 1984, right?
I can look it up.
Yeah, like, that movie is all about realism, and that movie's great. I've really come around on that movie, and I like it a lot now, the more I thought about it. Like, but in general, I like cinematic things, and noirs are always highly stylized in terms of the lighting and like the blocking and like the sets. They tend to be they have a sort of sense of grandeur to them. The cinematic techniques, because they're like, it's like 40s and 50s and 60s we're talking about, kind of depends on the movie and the director. Style for cinematography has gotten a lot bigger, and there are just so many more cameras and so many more lenses and stuff, I think, now as opposed to before. And there's also just more technology in terms of like crane shots and that kind of thing.
Summer 1993. Summer of 84 is the horror film. You were thinking summer 1993.
Got it. Yes, which I've also seen that horror film. But so, like, I think I like noirs for that reason. Like, it makes sense visually why I like a noir, because of all the lighting and because of all that aspect, even though, again, they weren't doing necessarily major things with the shots. And I also like good editing and pacing, and noirs tend to be very plot driven. And I'm kind of repeating my Instagram post at this point, but that makes sense. You had a question?
Well, I have a question for you, and I'm sorry if this derails what you're talking about, but basically you're saying you like the filmmaking that tends to go with noir. But Colmbia specifically, it's a studio, and I believe they were they weren't MGM, and I'm not sure MGM was, my film history is pretty rough. They were not high budget, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
No, I mean, they're not, noirs are, to me, they actually strike me as being like an earlier era horror film, kind of like noirs
I'm not sure who's put a lot of money into noir films.
Yeah, like, there really aren't. I mean, even if you think about the famous ones, In a Lonely Place, Double Indemnity, gosh, my brain is just blanking right now, but like, it's not like, I mean, I'm sure they cost money. I mean, the sets, I guess I wonder how much the sets would have cost. Like, that I have two theories. If the sets cost a lot, then maybe they were putting money into them, but I imagine they weren't. And even the lights, I imagine, weren't really that expensive. These aren't musicals. Like, musicals probably were a lot more expensive, like, which is what MGM was doing. I
noticed when I was watching Murder by Contract, that there was the same door, like, in several different, and it was like, it had the splatter pattern on it, so you could tell. It was like the hospital door and the bedroom door and da-da-da, and they were pretty clever about it. I just I notice stuff like that. So
yeah, well, and so my first theory is it could be that they put money in, but my second theory, which is the one I think you and I are talking about here, is that they probably didn't put a lot of money in noirs. They were cheaper to make. And I have a feeling that noirs of kind of the 40s, 50s, early 60s, kind of filmmaking transitioned away from those into cheap horrors. Because horror films, it's not like the 50s and 60s and 40s don't have horror films, but horrors, I think, really, horror as a genre flourished in the 60s and 70s. It seems like, due partially to the death of the Hays Code and to a changing of, like, there's a lot of reasons that go with that, but I think that the rise of the horror may have also contributed to the death of the noir. Now I know just enough about noirs to know that there's like a lot of debate about what is a real film noir and what is just a crime film or what is a heist film or what is a whatever film. That's not my boat. I'm not in that boat. I don't care. So I'm just talking noir in a general vague sense.
It's interesting though, talking about this is making me think of Roger Corman and how, he did these kind of cheap films that would make enough money to justify, their existence.
Well,
is this like the pre-Corman, but not like just, I don't want to say trash because I don't really believe in anything being trash, but not porn and not just like salacious stuff. Although it has, it definitely has its moments.
Yeah, like I'm thinking of Attack of the Crab Monsters, which he either directed or produced. I forget which.
Right, and I was just looking that up actually, and it's from 1957. So that would be after Noirs are...
Yeah, Noirs are on their way out by like Experiment in Terror, which is the latest one, I think, or maybe Crimson Kimono. One of those was the latest one they had in that collection. And I think it's like 1962. And I think most scholars consider noirs to be a period from something like 1949 to 1957 or something. It's like some weird, not most scholars, but there's like debate about that. And so I'm curious, like,
then there's neo-noirs and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, so. And there's stuff like, what was it that I watched? What's the one take In Bruges? Like In Bruges, some people consider to be like a noir or something, or a neo-noir, which, it isn't really, but,
there's The Limey, there's LA Confidential,
right.
There's, I think Criterion had a neo-noir section at one point.
So. Right, and so there is that question too. But like looking at Colombian Noir in that era, to me, I wonder if there isn't a film essay in the idea that noir, as horror started in the 60s and 70s, noir phased out. And it's not like, and it shifted. I also imagine that probably films like The French Connection and probably like these buddy cop movies kind of changed the way we do crime movies. Like, and gangster movies, like we still have gangster movies, but now gangster movies tend to be, unless it's Scorsese, they tend to be like action movies or something almost. I feel like gangster movies, maybe not. I don't know. It's like, I don't really think, how often do we do gangster movies anymore? Like certainly Scorsese, because The Irishman just came out, but I'm like, I actually don't know that we really do gangster movies that much anymore.
No, there was The Sopranos, which was television. I feel like they show up a lot of time in television.
Yeah.
But the heyday of like the Italian mob, sometimes the Jewish mob, seems to be ebbing.
Yeah. I almost wonder even if The Godfather is also partially to blame for like some of noir's kind of like phasing out, because like The Godfather is a very intricate look at a sort of mob family, a mob era, and like that, noirs are never really, like, as much as I like them, they're just never really that complex. They're simpler. They tend to be simpler stories.
Right. They're not about larger mob structures. Even the one called The Mob was not about larger.
No. And so it's interesting. I wonder, this
mob families, mob. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder like how much, and Scorsese himself with Goodfellas and stuff like that. I wonder, cause it's not like all the noirs are about mobs or anything, but like, I wonder how like the focus shifts a little bit because of The Godfather and because of movies like,
and that's, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, and that's part of what I was going to ask you. You've seen now all these Colombian Noirs, and you're approaching this as a viewer, not as a historian or a critical viewer. But
critical.
Not as an
amateur. Yeah, an amateur critic, an amateur theorist.
Right. So how much do you know about the bigger picture of noir? About, Double Indemnity, I just checked, was Paramount. Like, how much do you know about which others do? And are you curious to continue exploring it, or not until Criterion makes it into a channel?
Well, I'm always curious about noirs. Like, I've seen Double Indemnity, I've seen Out of the Past, I've seen, I'm blanking on names, but I've seen some of the big names in noir. Like, I'm not, it was weird to me that I watched Colombian Noir, and the more I think about it, the more I'm like, well, no, I've watched Out of the Past, I've watched these movies. And so it's not that weird. I don't know the gangster movies of the 30s as well, which is probably like precursors to noir. And so I wonder why I haven't watched as many of those. But watching the Colombian Wars, it's like I kind of understand their place in history a little bit, thanks to, you know, the trailer they put in front of the Colombian Wars, but also that section. But also, like, just sort of because I have a little bit of a grasp of film history, I kind of understand that, like, Colombian Wars are largely post-war, not all of them, but like there's like pre-war, post-war noirs. There's one of the differences about Colombian Wars, I think, is that like they are a little looser on the structure even than like some. Well, that's not really true because I don't know firmly how like Paramount did it or something. But like I feel like Colombian Wars don't. They are cheaper and they are a little more exploratory, whereas Double Indemnity and Out of the Past are really good, but there is much more of a stronger sense of femme fatale. I've seen Mildred Pierce, that's what I forgot about, which is sort of notable for being in a subversion of it, of the form. Mm-hmm. But like there tends to be a higher focus on like thinking about the big ones I've seen, there's more of a focus on like the femme fatale, even than there might be in the Colombian Wars. And I think that might have to do with the kind of money that probably went towards Mildred Pierce or Double Indemnity, or like, it's not a lot, it's still cheaper, but it's probably more than went to the Colombian Wars. Cause a lot of them, like there's money, but it's, I don't know, I guess it depends. It's hard for me to even, you know, I feel like I do really need to learn more, you know?
I mean, I'll say the ones I watched and like Drive a Crooked Road, The Sniper, was that a Colombian Noir?
It was. I mean, debate. I mean, we have our own sort of internal idea on that, but it is part of their batch of it.
And Murder
was made by Columbia in that era, but sorry.
Yeah, and Murder by Contract were probably the three that stuck out the most to me. There was also a Detour. Was that one of them?
It wasn't, though. It feels like a noir.
Okay.
But I think that wasn't Columbia. I think that was a different company.
Okay, that was not.
I mean, you can look it up, but
I'm looking it up really quickly. Yeah, it's Producers Releasing Corporation.
Yeah, that was smaller.
Okay, but so the three I mentioned, the thing I noticed about them is you've got very simple plots. They're just kind of creative in what they do with very little, I would say.
Right, which is why I feel like Colombian Wars, and maybe this is really only true for Colombian Wars, but they really do feel like they're that era's version of, look, you've got $10, some sticks, and some bubble gum.
Yeah.
Here's Humphrey Bogart. Do your best. Like that's like, they have bigger stars than you might get in like a cheap horror movie of today's world, but like that's because it's the studio era, not because.
But you also get kind of interest, like part of the interest of Drive a Crooked Road is seeing. I always want to say Mickey Rourke or Rooney, very different people.
Very different.
Mickey Rooney playing against type.
Yeah.
You know, which isn't and doing a good job at it, so it's not just like a gimmick type of thing.
Yeah, I love him in that movie.
Yeah, so you know, I'm not sure that's not, because that didn't really happen in Murder by Contract or The Sniper that I'm aware of. I don't know any of the actors in those.
Well, and even The Sniper, like they're not to say that those actors and Edward Dmytryk, the director, didn't have full careers, but it's not very well known, and I would hazard that Edward Dmytryk and then the stars, other than maybe like Alfred Menchot, I forget how to say his name, like there wasn't big stars. It was more like character actors and also just vague unknowns. Like I think they all had careers, but just like it's not Humphrey Bogart.
But that's always interesting to see when you don't have like a Bogey doing Bogey or Gloria Graham doing, you know, her thing, but you have like these blue collar actors almost, or people that are kind of at the end of their career, or people that are wanting to do something different. You get kind of interesting movie. Sometimes you get terrible movies from that. I mean, sometimes you know. I mean, we were watching a movie last night, Deep Rising, where, you know, it was almost most interesting for seeing Digimon Hosu, you know, doing a completely different part than you normally see in a role with Treat Williams, you know.
Our apologies for how we pronounce his name. We don't know.
Well, Treat Williams, I think I pronounced right. But yeah, Digimon Hosu, I'm not sure about. But, you know, but the movie itself, it's just pretty paint by numbers, garbage. But it was kind of interesting, the collection. The most interesting part of that movie was the collection of people that it got together. Whereas something like The Sniper, where you have a director of a certain renown with, actor, you can get something interesting from that.
Yeah, well, and even like, so Tight Spot, again, since I'm the one who's seen these, I can even say, like, you're right, like Tight Spot is an older Ginger Rogers. In fact, it's not her last role, but it's in the later, she stopped doing movies at a certain point. So it's in the later part of her career, but not her life, because I think she lived until the 80s, but she didn't really make too many movies past the 50s. And I think Tight Spot is in the 50s, like 54, I don't know, whatever. But like, it's an slightly older Ginger Rogers, and like, she's playing opposite Brian Keith, who I think from his Wikipedia page looked to be more famous for TV, but he was in this movie and they're pretty good. It's kind of a fun little movie. Like, it's not great. It's two people in a room and it's based on a play and all that stuff, but there's something to it. Like, there was something to the tension and the way it was built up. And like, Ginger Rogers is also older than Brian Keith. And like, it's most of the time in these noirs, the woman is younger, but like, I feel like it's rare in a musical. I can't think of a musical where like the leads are, the man is older than the woman, or sorry, where the woman is older than a man and it's not a part of the plot or the story. Like, that just doesn't happen too much in like the bigger movies that I know from the era. Not that I'm, again,
the only one I can think of is Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Jean Arthur is older than Jimmy Stewart, but it doesn't really come up, but it has a little of the feel like she's older than him.
Yeah, and Ginger Rogers looks older than Brian Keith, but it also just doesn't come up in the story really, as far as I remember. Yeah. So like, that's interesting. And then you do get things like The Sniper, where it is it's subversive to sort of general things, because we've talked about it, but there was, the police profiling and the way the man on the street style cinematography. And so it's like, you do get these little subversive things in there too, which are both subversive to the genre itself, but also just sort of to cinema at large, maybe. So I don't know, I'm still sort of reaching for why I like these so much, but it was an interesting exploration, and I am looking forward to watching more. They actually just, this morning I looked, and the Western Noir section, which I saw on the calendar, is now available. They've themed it and set it all up, and I'm going to probably watch all of those.
It's Big Trouble at Black Rock or whatever on that list, because that would be a Western noir, wouldn't it? Or
it would be. I think it would qualify as a Western noir. It's not. I don't think Criterion has availability to that, so it's not an issue of. I just don't think they're streaming that. I think I paid for it to stream. So
Bad Day at Black Rock,
yeah. And but that would totally go in there. But so I'm looking forward to watching that. And I watched The Stranger, which isn't a part of the Colombian Noir section, but that's effectively a noir, really,
Oh, The Third Man would be a noir too, right? Wouldn't it? That's not a Colombian noir.
No, that's another noir I've seen. So I'm excited to go into the Western noirs and to keep doing the noirs. Oh, and the only thing I haven't talked about, maybe to wrap this up, I guess, is women in noirs. Like, Mildred Pierce is an interesting movie because it's a subversion of form, specifically, woman as main character, which just, there basically aren't any really, although Tight Spot, I mean, there are little things that are kind of where the women character gets more of it. But like, noirs are it's interesting to me because sometimes when you talk to people think of film noirs as like these hard-boiled things, but they're kind of mixing it up, because like, that's more like, I guess, the earlier gangster movies or a certain kind of crime movie from the era. But noirs, and like these Colombian noirs in particular, there's a lot of stuff about love or lust or beauty or like attraction. And like, it's so concerned with romance, even if often romance is kind of like, you look at it and you're like, this was made by men in the 50s. But like, it is still about that, and like about women and what little power they have. And it may be not intentionally, it's like them struggling to use their beauty and their attraction to try and mold what they want to get out of life.
Well, but then you have oddballs like Murder by Contract, which is almost like a bromance kind of a one.
Yeah,
I like Murder by Contract a lot.
Me too.
But it's a very quirky one. It doesn't really follow.
No, Murder by Contract is not is again subversion of form. Like Affair in Trinidad and Gilda, and like those are more standard. And I guess they both have Rita Hayworth in it, although that's just by chance. Or something like The Big Heat, or what was the other one? Human Desire are more standard in like how they treat the women, and like you know what their fate is and how they're portrayed, and like what the fact that they like crime and what that means about them. Whereas something like Murder by Contract is more subversive to that. And I wish I kind of want to rewatch it, though. I think it's off this channel now. I think that left like everything else. That one I didn't fall in love with right at first, but the more I've thought about it, the more I've been like, it was just kind of quirky, and I liked it.
I like that one a lot because it was weird. Yeah. So it sounds like you will keep going with noirs. Oh, I was going to say Niagara is a noir that you have. I mean, not Colombian, but that's Marilyn Monroe is in that along with Joseph Cotton.
I really need to watch that.
Who's in The Third Man, which is what made me think of it.
Yeah.
And then Jean Peters. I'm sure she was a big star at the time. I just don't actually know who she is. Yeah.
Shall we move on? Or
I was going to say, do you have any? I mean, have you talked basically about the ones that were your favorites?
Yeah, I've talked about all the ones that are my favorite, and I've sort of just I'm sort of exploring, and I just was sort of like throwing my exploration into the world, and I want to watch more. I want to watch the Western noirs, and there's plenty of big noirs I haven't seen. Like maybe I need to make a list even and sort of like think about my different where I place these and where they are in time and stuff.
There's got to be scholarship on noirs too. I feel like
there's books written about it. I probably need to buy a book, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen to an audiobook. That's what I like to do.
That's a good idea.